There are also benefit administrators in my research who indicate that there is no real sign that employers would stop giving health insurance to their employees. It's a major recruitment tool for how to get employees, and aspects of the law have been delayed so that it can work better. And perhaps these problems that you're identifying could be rectified short of complete defunding. I want to go back to where we started for a moment just to get you clear on this point. A government shutdown under these circumstances, because it doesn't sound like it'll be resolved, that's an acceptable outcome to you?
Look, I don't want a government shutdown. I don't think Harry Reid should shut down the government. Let me make one point. The House of Representatives did something else terrific last night, which is they passed a bill to make clear that regardless of what happens, the men and women of our military should be paid. And Harry Reid, I believe, should bring that up. That passed unanimously in the House. And listen, right now, Harry Reid and President Obama have been essentially holding the military hostage, threatening their paychecks over this potential shutdown they might force. I think regardless of what happens, we should pass the bill. No, of course it's not acceptable. We shouldn't have a shutdown, which means Harry Reid has to move off his absolutist position. His position, I mean, you've seen multiple compromises from the Republicans, and you've seen zero. I mean, can you tell me any movement the Democrats have had whatsoever?
But how does he move? What makes him move? What have you done to make him move, other than disrupt, your critics would say? Because as I outlined before, you've lost ground from even this summer on the position of getting people to vote with you. You lost ground from that position, and you got to have Democrats if you're going to overturn this thing.
Well, actually, just this week, Joe Manchin came out, Democrat from West Virginia, and said he supported a delay in the individual mandate. And listen, last time this was in the Senate, it was unfortunate. We had division among Senate Republicans. I had hoped Senate Republicans would be united. That didn't happen, but I'll tell you this, I'm optimistic. This next time around, this is an opportunity for Senate Republicans to come home. I believe.
You've raised money on this. You've taken to the floor for 21 hours. You haven't moved anything legislatively. Do you concede that point?
I don't remotely. And David, I recognize that the Washington establishment hasn't been convinced by the arguments, because the Washington establishment has been exempted from some of the harms. Members of Congress, how can you possibly justify to the American people that members of Congress are exempted from the law, aren't put on the exchanges like millions of Americans?
Well, they're part of the exchanges. They just get an employer contribution like
but millions of Americans don't. Millions of Americans
but 150 million Americans who get it from their employers don't they?
But anyone on the exchanges doesn't get the employer mandate, except for members of Congress. And President Obama did that. I mean, look, people are frustrated with Washington, and the simplest reason is you've got politicians in both parties who aren't listening to the people and who are living by a different set of rules. The ruling class gets exempted. So Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats came to President Obama and said, we want out. We don't want under Obamacare. You know, I had an exchange with Dick Durbin on the floor of the Senate where he described the Senate's health care as first-class tickets, and he was arguing we should stick the American people in coach. Now, look, I think his own analogy shows what's wrong with this system. At a minimum, members of Congress shouldn't be treated better than the American people, and neither should big business. And if Harry Reid showed any modicum of being willing to compromise, he would agree to what the House has done to delay this all and say, this isn't ready for prime time, it's not working, and we're going to treat the American people at least as well as we treat big business.
You're talking a lot about Democrats. They're critical of you, but it's hard for them to get a word in edgewise because it's members of your own party who are so critical of what you've done and how you've done it. You have colleagues who have accused you of putting on a show. That was Senator Corker. Congressman Peter King said you're a fraud, that you're lying to the base, over-promising something that's possible. George Will, who's been a conservative columnist for the Washington Post and others, has been very supportive of you in the past, but he wrote this week, and I want to have you respond to it because it seems to crystallize some of the opposition. Those people who are best at deceiving others first deceive themselves, he wrote. They often do so by allowing their wishes to be fathers of their thoughts and begin by wishing that everything has changed. Republicans now making a moral melodrama over any vote that allows the ACA to be funded should remember Everett Dirksen of Illinois, the leader of Senate Republicans during passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. He recalled, 40 preachers caught me one afternoon there in that lobby. I am not a moralist, I told them. I'm a legislator. It is good to be both. It is sterile to be the former to the exclusion of the latter. Are you more moralist than legislator?
Look, I'm just trying to fight for 26 million Texans and for the American people, and I'm pretty sure George Will, in that column, argued that what we should be doing is delaying Obamacare which is exactly what the House of Representatives just voted to do. And one important thing to emphasize, I mean, you keep, and all of the voices of Washington keep saying, we need compromise. Twice now, Republicans in the House have compromised, and twice Harry Reid has said, we won't even have a conversation. I refuse to compromise. We want to fund it all. We want to stick it on the American people, and we won't budge. That's not a reasonable position, and if we have a shutdown, it will be because Harry Reid holds that absolutist position and essentially holds the American people hostage.
Who's the legislator you most admire? Who's your big role model?
You know, I'll tell you, the senator I most admire was former Texas Senator Phil Gramm. And it's actually a very good example, going back to, you know, there are voices who say this is impossible. And if you remember back in 1993, I know you do, when Hillary Care was being debated. And when Hillary Care was being debated, there were a lot of Republicans who came forward with what I called at the time Hillary Care Light. We'll partially socialize health care. And it was because Republicans were convinced we can't stop this. And then Phil Gramm strode out there, and he said, and I know you'll remember this, he said, this'll pass over my cold, dead political body. And a whole lot of Republicans who were scared, they looked over, he wasn't killed, they ran behind him and they said, yeah, what he said. Look, the power of leadership can change debates. We saw that just a month ago with Syria. When President Obama said he was going to launch unilateral attacks on Syria, you had leaders of both houses of Congress support him. And then the American people spoke up at overwhelming numbers and said, we don't want to get involved in a sectarian civil war in Syria where there's no clear U.S. national security benefit to doing so. And what happened? The entire federal government turned. We didn't get involved. We didn't launch those attacks. And just weeks earlier, conventional wisdom in Washington said it's impossible.
Do you regret comparing the future of Obamacare to the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany?
Well, the premise of your question isn't true. I didn't make that comparison. What I said is that there have been many voices in Washington who said, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this. And I went through the centuries where over and over again, when facing big challenges, Americans have risen to the occasion, whether it was the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, whether it was going to the moon under John F. Kennedy, or whether it was winning the Cold War. At every stage, there were voices of conventional wisdom who say this can't be done. And at every stage, the American people rose to the occasion. And what I said is we should do the same here. We should look to, if we empower the American people, if we get Washington to listen to the people, that's how we get this changed.
Do you ride this to the presidential nomination?
You know, it's easy for Washington to focus on politics. I understand. That's the business of this town. What I am trying to do every day is focus on making a difference in the lives of the American people. Every survey that's done in this country, the top priority of the American people is jobs in the economy. Under Harry Reid's Senate, we don't even talk about jobs in the economy. Obamacare is the biggest job killer in this country, and millions of Americans are hurting. You know, I'd like to see a Democrat respond to James Hoffa's letter that says this is right now destroying the health care of millions of Americans. That's not me. That's a Democrat union leader who has supported Harry Reid and President Obama. We need to be listening to the people because people are hurting because of Obama.
Do not shut down the government. Do not shut down the economy. Pass a budget on time.